our next panel. We're going to be exploring career paths in tech. So right now I'm going to be bringing on to stage two of our panelists, Renee and Ran. Hello, welcome everybody.
Hello, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
Nice to meet you all. Be here.
Indeed.
Nice for you to be here. Just so everybody knows, we were supposed to have Nikki from Amazon was supposed to be joining us, but she couldn't attend due to personal reasons last second. So sorry. It's going to be the three of us here, and very excited to go on this panel.
I'm sure we can fill the time.
I think so. I have a hunch that it will not be an issue. But first place that we always like to start with these is because tech is such a broad term that can mean so many things. But just hearing from both of you, what do you actually do within tech? What does that role entail on a day-to-day basis? Like actually mean, and how did you wind up in that role? Like how did you discover it and get there? So Renee, would you like to go first?
Sure thing. Hello, everybody. I am Renee Ritchie, she, they pronouns, and I am a senior proposal strategist at Salesforce. I actually came to Salesforce from Google, which is interesting. I was there primarily as a contractor, but my goal day to day is working with sales teams such as account executives and solution engineers to make sure that they're putting out high quality proposals to potential customers or existing customers looking to increase their Salesforce footprint. I promise I can talk. And my route to get there was a little bit roundabout. I started my career fresh out of college right around 2006. And very early on, we ended up with a pretty deep recession. So I found myself taking a lot of contract roles, specifically just to, keep the lights on, as it were. And that's kind of how I ended up falling into tech, specifically through a search QA position at Yahoo. And then it just kind of progressed from there. I've done work specifically in mobile games, tech, construction, promotional marketing. And then it led me to my role at Google, where I was doing a lot of content management for the Google Partner Programs, and also managing the Google Partner Program website. And then I took the role at Salesforce because it was a little bit more geared with what I wanted to do with my career. It was specifically the content management part, as opposed to the junior webmistress part. And I've been at Salesforce for 6 years now. It's been a remarkable journey. But it's not a coding role at all. But I do have to know a fair bit about Salesforce products, specifically to coach sales teams on how to position things correctly.
Awesome. And yeah, we very purposely want to have some non-technical and technical on here so we can show how wide the spectrum is. But just to drill down real quickly, you mentioned you took the role at Salesforce because of the more content management piece.
That's correct.
Like what does that actually mean, and what type of interest does that entail? Like why did you want to do that, and what is that?
So specifically content management is making sure that any content you have around, enabling your Salesforce. When I say Salesforce in this particular instance, I mean the personnel behind it. And the various folks that are going to be, working with your products, making sure that they have the right information when they need it and where they need it. My team, not only in addition to managing the various proposals that actually go out to customers, we also manage the response library, where we get a lot of those responses, which has somewhere over 2,000 just Q&A pairs of just questions and answers that we see frequently on requests for information or requests for proposals. So a lot of that, just making sure that stays up to date, because Salesforce updates their stuff 3 times a year. So we need to make sure our stuff is updated too. And then also, making sure we have the right information, we have the right graphics, making sure it all stays accessible for folks with different needs. There's a lot that that in content management entails. And that's in addition to, advising on strategy and all of that. I actually didn't have any real proposal management experience until I actually started at the job at Salesforce, and I learned very quickly. So definitely don't be afraid to learn stuff on the job as you go.
Okay, awesome. And Ram, I'd love to ask you the same question. You know, what does your role entail, and how did you get there?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, Ram Khalsa, and I'm laughing a little bit because Renee was sharing a bit about her background, and I feel like I had the reverse in the sense that right now I work at Google and I work as a software engineer, and I've been there for about a year and a half. But previous to that, I spent about 7 years in management consulting. So as Renee was throwing out RFPs, RFIs, responding to requests for proposal and information, it brought me back to the days of working in consulting, and that was my life. And also just a good reminder of how, as long as every step you take, you're learning things you're interested in, and it's opening doors for you. Your first choice isn't always going to be what you do forever, right? And careers are flexible. But anyway, so I kind of alluded to starting out in management consulting. My day-to-day as a software engineer is, there will be periods of heavy collaboration and design with product teams to say, given this area, this is what we're looking to build. It fills these use cases for our users. There's this kind of pain point today, or a desire for this type of feature, or a fix to this type of problem that people experience using our product. And the specific product area I happen to work on right now is Google Drive. And other than that, it would be, coding and making contributions to the huge code base that makes up Google. And so, there's kind of a split of time spent in design, time spent actually coding features and rolling out the feature switches that gate that behavior and allow users to interact with it, and some other things of that nature. And I'm happy to answer any more like specific questions towards it, but I think that's probably a good top level.
I may have a roadmap question for you later.
Yeah, for sure.
My team uses Google Drive literally every day, so it's definitely, your work definitely has an impact.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think I use Google Drive every day, so it's awesome how big of an impact everything you're working on has. I'm sure that is very satisfying. We had a quick follow-up question that came in for Renee about would you consider your role in marketing under a marketing umbrella?
I would say it's more marketing adjacent. We usually take a lot of the marketing material that's already brought forward by marketing and making sure that it's positioned appropriately, not only for the brand, but also for the specific requirements a customer might have. So, for example, if somebody needs a customer service solution, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to talk about all of our marketing products, or specifically our integration parts of it, though that may end up being part of the solution. But the real kind of focus on it is going to be primarily the customer service piece of it. So it's just making sure that the messaging that each individual account team that I work with puts forward is appropriate to what the customer is asking for, gives them what they're asking for, and then kind of brings it to that next level to help out with a lot of the additional conversations that are already happening with digital transformations within these organizations. So it's really just, it's less marketing and more narrative continuity as far as the sales process is concerned.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
And we got a question in from Samantha for Ram. Would you describe your work on Drive to be more front end, back end, mix, full stack?
So I mostly work on Drive's backend. I actually joined as a full stack engineer, and then just based on kind of the sub projects that were available over time and where my interests were, I kind of moved to working more on the back end of Drive.
Okay, awesome. And just to follow up on that, is that something that you were more interested in back end, or what drove you to that, or is that happen to be the opportunity?
Yeah, and one thing I somewhat neglected is that transitioning from management consulting to working as a software engineer, right? There's a a knowledge gap where what I studied in college was industrial organizational psychology, right? So a far departure from working as a software engineer. And so there was a period where I was working in consulting and was kind of teaching myself software engineering. And I ended up going to a coding boot camp after I felt I was somewhat comfortable. And I actually ended up teaching there for a few months after.
Nice.
And really enjoyed myself and loved it. But the context and how it relates back to the question is that I learned how to be a software engineer. I learned JavaScript as my first language. And so, if you're learning JavaScript, you're kind of setting yourself up in most situations to be working in a front-end capacity in your first role. And that's not necessarily true everywhere at all, right? There's plenty of Node.js out there as a backend solution, but I felt like without a strong objection or this is specifically what I'm looking for, that was kind of what I was automatically interviewed for. And I was personally, I was more interested in backend problems, and I preferred to be a full stack engineer, and if not full stack, then backend. And if not, I was kind of like, I'll take what I can to get in the door. And I'm sure that just like any of my other career experiences in my life, if you do a great job, there's plenty of room to typically pivot into something that is, exactly what you want, right? And the most important thing is that your reputation within an organization is that you deliver, and you deliver at a high quality bar, right? And after that, mountains will move to help kind of figure out the details. So yeah, and I think I'm kind of starting to get over to this second question, but I'm going to turn it back to you, and then we can kind of iterate if we need to.
No, yeah, I think you perfectly also answered Elijah's question about how you kind of made that transition in terms of the boot camp. So I'm glad we touched on that. And we have a couple more questions coming in. Yang, was it just to follow up on Renee when you were talking about the role that you're currently in? Is that something where if there's an entry-level position, if you need a tech background, and if not, just to follow up, are there specific skills that you'd recommend people are working on for that role?
So I don't have a coding background. I tried to learn a little bit just to better understand things, though I was the only person on my team who knew HTML when I was working at Google. Weird how that happened. It was very much a business user focused team. But for me, I was working in primarily non-technical roles at tech companies. So the answer is yes, you absolutely can. If you don't necessarily have, technical skills, you can absolutely do a proposal strategist job. Absolutely. What you would probably need to understand is, kind of the basics of what a sales cycle looks like, from, the very earliest twinkle in the eye of the project on behalf of the customer to, kind of discovering what their needs are, putting together, a compelling narrative as to why you should pick one thing instead of another. Persuasive writing, which you probably cover a fair bit in some of your college courses, is definitely going to be relevant to that. And then, basically creating a high level of service once you have the contract signed. So yes, there's a lot of different skills out there that you can use that are not technical, specifically for a role like mine. I'm in fact in the middle of getting some certifications right now that are decidedly not technical and are primarily conceptual as far as their knowledge base. So yes, very much so without a tech background.
Can we ask what they are, or is it under wraps until you get them?
It's actually public information. There's a professional organization for proposal management professionals, APMP, Association of Proposal Management Specialists, professionals. I swear to God, I can talk. I promise. But they have a certification program, and I'm going for my foundation certification, which is the lowest level that they have. So they basically have 3 levels, and I'm going for that first level now. Finally, because I finally have the time for it after 6 years. So awesome. Yeah. But as far as resources, you can absolutely apply without a tech background. But there's plenty of places where you can learn more things specifically to add to that.
Perfect. And I think this is a good kind of segue into our next question for both of you. And Ram, I'll start on your side. And it's when students are submitting a resume, what can they do to stand out? A ton of people would love to work on the back end of the Google Drive, right? And like, I'm sure Google gets a ton of applications for every single role. So what can they do to stand out? And especially if they don't feel like they have the necessary skills for that position.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think that this question kind of transcends industries and, is very much a challenge around the frustrating chicken and egg problem for a new graduate of, I need to have an experience to get a job, but I need to have a job to get experience, right? And so, the biggest thing that always served me and that occurs to me in my personal job, and Laura, who was speaking as I kind of tuned in, was talking a little bit about this, is where your narrative intersects with your understanding of the language that's used on that job. And what I would say is oftentimes, I kind of like Renee graduated around the time of the recession and spent 11 months searching for my first job because I was determined that I was going to work in consulting, and I was coming from a non-target school with a non-target major and had gone to high school in India. So I was like somewhat off of the beaten path of here's how you interview on campus and all those types of things. And I was determined that I was going to do it. And it took someone who was already in the industry sitting down with me and saying, you are kind of loosely writing towards these concepts, but let's talk about what they really mean. And then let's also rephrase experiences you've had in your life that you might think of being unrelated to these skills as, what is really required underneath these skills. And since then, I've kind of volunteered to help people with resumes for the last, 10 or so years. And the number one thing that I feel needs to be done, typically working with the average person, is saying, what are the 3 skills that it takes to do this job? And then how can we reduce the experience to those skills? A lot of times we fixate on, this role requires an advanced understanding of Tableau, Python, and 5 other things. And what I would tell you is, on the other side, oftentimes there are hiring managers hiring for roles, and this isn't personally about Google or anything. This is kind of my experience over the course of my career. But, there are hiring managers sometimes in roles where they're hiring for positions that have fuzzy requirements. And so the list for what is required to get the job requirements are like a wish list, right? Like, I wish this candidate had, these 15 traits, but in reality, oftentimes the person that's hired has a subset of those, and it might be a smaller subset, but they've done a good job of communicating their skills within that, right? So to kind of sum up this somewhat ramble, I think the real focus is, how do you rephrase the experiences that you've had using the language of the business you're applying to? And, an example would be, I've seen bakers get jobs and opportunities at like prestigious business programs over people coming from top tier businesses, because the language that they used was, I managed inventory, I reduce the cost of supply by 20%, effectively making it so that profitability rose by blah, blah, blah. They understood what the business cared about, and they phrased their experiences within that language. So,
yeah. I absolutely second everything that Ram has said on that. And I do want to add, if you find yourself in a place where you really want a position and there are particular skills that you may not necessarily have, go at it with a beginner's mind. Think about what those particular items are tools for. So, for example, Tableau is an excellent example. Tableau is a Salesforce company. Tableau is primarily used for data analysis, and it's specifically a tool for data analysis. So, one of the things that you could potentially use there is, the ability to look at something and pull out trends. So, really understanding what the tool is meant to be used for and being able to do that without the tool is remarkably useful, because the tools are easy to learn. I have It took me about 3 months to actually pick up Salesforce from an admin perspective once I actually joined the organization and had the time to learn. But I didn't have any experience from the admin side of Salesforce when I started, but I picked it up and I learned. So being willing to, pick things up and be a quick study is also super helpful, and demonstrating that you're a quick study. Like, even if you had to learn like a very specific tool, just say, learned X tool in, a short amount of time, because that tells hiring managers that you're going to be really easy to scale up for the things that you don't have.
Perfect. And I think both of those go to the point that no one expects you to have all of the skills, and just understanding how you can apply what you do have and demonstrate your ability to gain those skills on the job is super
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah. And you will, even if you end up are not a technical person, you will learn technical things while on the job. Trust me.
Exactly, 100%. We had this follow up. I guess this is specifically about anything that you would have done differently for your transition from consulting to SWE to software engineering. Based on your experience, if you could go back.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. I think that largely I don't have some big response to this question to say, here's an area where I really fell down in the transition and I really had a challenge. I think that some of the areas that I expected to have some differences were, the fact that when I was working in management consulting, I was leading 40 and 50 person teams. And, today my day-to-day is I individual contributor on a project, right? And that is a mindset shift. And I was ready for that to be, a big part of the journey, and it has been. I think in terms of preparation, and if it's helpful, I would say here are the 2 or 3 things that I really focused on that I'm glad I focused on, because I think otherwise I'm not giving you any kind of value in this response. But some of the things that I really focused on the transition were, number one, trying to check my previous experiences at the door, right? So if you go through and transform to a different way of doing things, your job function looks different. The coworkers that you have might come from different backgrounds or have different ways of interacting. You're also joining a new company culture. One of the biggest things that I was focused on was new is good, and just purely focusing on the experiential, right? So trying to adjust as opposed to compare to experiences that I had in the past in one arena or the other. And then the other is more tactically preparing for how I could make myself as the most competitive candidate possible. I think there's a variety of things, and if anybody wants to talk about this in particular, I would love for you to follow up, because I think some aspects are deeper than maybe a panel would support. But there were specific things I did around like, if you're pursuing that type of job, how do you kind of get the best offer or like play the market a little bit. There were aspects around what's the best way to technically prepare yourself. So, how do you focus on studying for data structures and algorithms? How do you really get to where, when you're given a toy problem or a system design question, you're consistently knocking it out of the park, or at least minimizing the amount of nervousness you feel that impacts your ability to perform in that interview. And some things like that I was really focused on, and I was kind of happy with some prep that I got from the program. But really, I took 6 months as I was interviewing and said, I'm going to read Cracking the Coding interview back to back, do every problem in there. I think I did probably 300 problems on Leak Code of all different difficulties. And then I kind of warmed up in terms of interviews, where I, found interviews that were, places where it was somewhat safe to fail. And then once I felt like I was consistently performing at the level that I expected myself to, then I created very curated submission packages, like a curated resume, curated cover letter, tried to find a role that matched exactly what I thought that I was strong at, and then would make one application with a referral from someone. So anyway, sorry for the long answer.
No, definitely insightful. And like you mentioned, it's hard to really touch on all of this in a panel discussion. So Ram has office hours if you want to connect with him as well on Odyssey. I think this was a good question that came in that, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. One of my AirPods died.
Oh,
no.
I have my girlfriend's as a backup. What is an advice you were told by your mentors that has helped you gain clarity on what you truly wanted to pursue for your career? And I think I'd love to hear the answer from both of you on this one.
Renee, why don't you go first? Because I was just chatting up a story.
Not a problem. I chat very similarly. Honestly, I didn't really have a whole lot of mentors until I actually came to Salesforce. I was kind of doing it on my own. Like the big advice I got from anyone who's in really a mentor position was specifically to phrase items I did on my resume more as accomplishments as opposed to duties, which was a huge impact for me and definitely got me a lot more interviews. But as far as kind of what I wanted to pursue for my career, I didn't really have a whole lot of advice. I've kind of just been following my bliss in a few ways, which led me to pursuing an opportunity at Salesforce that was a contract opportunity that was actually potentially had a lot of risk compared to what I was leaving behind at Google. I took the jump and it actually paid off marvelously. That was, 6 years ago. So don't be afraid to take risks if it's something that you truly know that you want to do. And I actually also took that risk for some of my side interests, which includes writing for tabletop RPGs and Twitch streaming.
Oh, that's awesome. There should be a panel just on that.
I could talk about that at length, but I am definitely not an expert.
Yeah, I think that I feel very thankful to have had the mentors that I have in my entire career, and I felt like I've always found myself with people that have just kind of delivered a different way of thinking in the right moment. And I think one of the most impactful, if I was just going to pick one, would be that a lot of times people think about happiness in a very linear fashion in relation to their job. Right. So the most common pattern of this that I've seen, and this wasn't my focus, but I've seen it in folks working on my team and for a couple of years, was hyperfixating on what you're doing. Right. So like I want to, in the consulting world, it would maybe be like, I want to work on a project where, I'm working with machine learning because I read a couple articles, and like, if I'm not working on machine learning, then like my life is wasted. And like this big kind of charge around the topical area of your work. But I found that oftentimes it isn't actually the biggest needle of your happiness or job satisfaction. And so one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten is to kind of think about each of the different areas. So what's your commute? What's your work-life balance? What is your level of challenge? What's your level of autonomy? How much do you like the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel supported by your manager? Do you have career flexibility? And the topical area, right? And like thinking of how much those different levers move your actual happiness to make sure that you're focusing on the right things when you make decisions about where you want to work and what kind of work you want to do. So I know I've taken us a little bit over time, but thanks for having me. Oh, your AirPods are dead though, Brian. I think the replacement ones might not be working.
Yeah, we can't hear you at all. Oh
no. Oh no.
This is why I have wired.
I can't hear you. You're probably going to have to try to disconnect them possibly. Either that or check if they're still connected to the previous.
And this is how you know we're doing it live.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Oh, hello.
Oh, you came in for a second, but then disappeared again.
And it was very, very distorted. Like the pod people came and took Brian. Oh no. Well, in the meantime, while Brian gets his technical difficulty sorted out, kind of looking through some various questions. Look like there's actually one more. But I think we might actually be moving over because
we are out of. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
I can
Okay,
hear you
Perfect.
perfectly.
Thank you.
awesome,
Thank you
awesome.
for
I will
bridging the gap
have
for
office.
me.
Sorry, I will have office hours up very shortly. I had to take a break, but I'm going to be back in the game now. Brian, definitely look for info from me on that. But yeah, and some of you I have some one-on-ones with later, so I'll look forward to talking with you then.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you. This was a great panel. Really enjoyed it. And like Renee mentioned, check her out on office hours. They're both available on there. And yeah, if any follow-up questions, just feel free to message me and I can forward them along as well. So
Awesome.
thank you both for your time.
I think my office hours are kind of full for a little bit, but if someone had something more urgent, reach out to Brian. Brian can give you a way to reach out to me, and thanks for having us. So.
Absolutely. And my LinkedIn information is on my profile, so definitely take a look.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So